Are you hurt?
It would have been worse if you hadn't come along. Wait, I've seen you around the hideaway. You're new, aren't you?
I'm Clive.
Well, you knew it was coming. You knew it would be that time. It is time at last for Gorzak. He's a big hit. So Gorzak, before we start the video today, is there anything you'd like to say? An astute point as always, Gorzak. Thank you. So, thank you, Gorzak. So, today's episode, before we begin, right, there's actually a few things I want to get out there so that I'm not misinterpreted, right? I am not saying that any single one element of Final Fantasy XVI that we criticise is bad in isolation. I am not saying that some of the situations the game presents as social or political commentary are unbelievable, unrealistic, may haven't happened or may not happen, right? I am talking about pacing, I am talking about storytelling, I am talking about setting a mood and whether or not that mood should stay as one unbroken note. And, more importantly, I'm talking about whether or not your story is presenting a world worth exploring, inhabiting, or even saving. Gorzak, chop, chop, chop! He's gone into standby. Gorzak, chop, chop, chop! No, not that one. No. No, it's just a choppy bit I wanted. Final Fantasy XVI is finally out, having completely snuck up on me because the bastards released it on a Thursday instead of Friday like a normal video game. Considering I do wrestling training on Thursdays, I think it was honestly reprehensible that Square Enix didn't at least consult with me on the decision to bump forward the release date and account for the fact that I just assume things like the times and dates of stuff instead of actually confirming them. As if anybody has the time to Google the game industry's release schedule. Quite frankly, the decision not to push back the release date an entire week for everybody, considering I've had quite a busy weekend, is most likely a targeted attack towards me, bordering quite possibly on harassment. Or a hate crime. A border that depends entirely on how long I decide to drag this whole bit out. Actually, I think I'll just stop now. So Final Fantasy XVI, a long-awaited game that, despite a lengthy demo popped out before release, has kept much of its story beats under wraps. So under wraps, in fact, that vast quantities of it aren't even presented in the story itself, squirreled away instead in a massive encyclopedia menu that can be checked in real time, just on the off chance you might like to know where the fuck you are, who the fuck anybody is, what the fuck they're doing, and why the fuck anything is happening. I do, in fact, need to get around to producing that video I want to make explicitly about the game industry's focus on lore over narrative and the correct use of supplementary material versus using glorified wikis as a crutch. I have poured many hours into Final Fantasy XVI since its aggravating Thursday launch, and while I will obviously have a full written review coming to the Jimquisition.com, I figured I can share a few thoughts with you now, since if you're watching this video, you're either interested in my opinion, or in asking what happened to me, while adding that you, and I quote, liked the old Jim Sterling when he was a man. Every bloody week I get that. Final Fantasy XVI is an interesting game. One frustrating in its inconsistency. On the one hand, you have a game with a neat fighting system, really cool set pieces, and the occasional, well-written scene. On the other, you have a main plot that's predictable as hell, a typically Square Enix prioritization of visuals so flashy and overly animated they undermine the aforementioned fighting system, and, well, we're gonna get to how fucking miserable it is. I'll say this for the game overall. It's nice that they've just embraced the fact it's Final Fantasy in name only. After years of pussyfooting around here, of trying to compromise with a twisted hybrid that attempts to retain the spirit of a turn-based RPG while offering real-time combat and ending up with something that's a little bit confused and messy, I think it's honestly resulted in a better playing game that they finally thought, fuck it, we're Final May Cry now. Final Fantasy XVI is not an RPG any more than, say, God of War is these days. It's an action game with the same RPG elements as any other action game, and while, as an old school fan, I honestly lament the chances of a mainline Final Fantasy going turn-based or active time ever again are almost zero, I'll take a game fully committing to a genre shift over one that's too afraid of its own desire to move on. I'm enjoying FF16 well enough. I honestly think the fact it's trying so hard to be Game of Thrones is rather adorable in its own way, with all its violence and saying of the fuck word and plot contrivances yanked right out of A Song of Ice and Fire. I love how ridiculous some of the climactic battles get in terms of scope and visual spectacle, and I really like about, let's say, 3 characters. A lot of the criticisms I could mention are not exactly game killers. Some of them are a matter of preference or nitpicks or stuff that doesn't detract to the point of major grievance. All but one. And it is, unfortunately, a matter of such consistency and scale that it has been making playing the game genuinely quite difficult. The fact that everything and everyone in this game is so fucking contemptible that I don't enjoy spending one single solitary second in its world. Final Fantasy XVI takes place in the world of Valisthea. Valisthea? Valistae. Vagisil. I wonder what the most amount of Vagisil someone's eaten is. Because the answer's not 0. Vagisil. So anyway, Valisthea, a world devoid of people of colour because of some vague shit about medieval times that developers always trot out to justify such stupid and historically inaccurate exclusion. You watch as whole essays get written in the comments section about that one sentence now. Yeah, I remember the reaction to what I said in that Witcher 3 review. Despite this decision, 16 rather quite boldly, and maybe questionably given that context, includes slavery as a central theme. See, some people are born with innate magical powers, and those people are given up by their parents and raised as slaves, more or less walking batteries, condemned to a life of silent servitude as they use their powers for mundane tasks. The regular people of Valisthea are almost universally fucking useless without the magic they exploit. It's a recurring plot point that without the use of a bearer or special crystals with a limited usage, they can't do fucking anything, up to and including drying their own washing or keeping their food from rotting. It seems that, without bearers, this entire world of incompetent morons would starve to death caked in their own shit and blood, lying useless and weak out in the streets like the infected at the end of 28 days later. Despite this complete and total reliance on magic users, however, it seems that 98% of the world absolutely fucking despises them. And I mean they really, to the point of going out of their way, fucking despise them. Delightedly, in fact. The main character is one such bearer from a kingdom that is presented as heroic because it treats its slaves a bit better than other places. As a magic user, facially marked as such for all the world to see, he faces the gleeful bigotry of the populace, a bigotry so prevalent and all-encompassing that it pretty much counts as a national pastime. For the several real-world days I've played this, I've watched as the hilariously named fantasy protagonist, Clive, is harassed, spat on and resented by almost every single person he meets, no matter their social standing or class. From the nobility and soldiery of any given antagonistic faction to the most common and poverty-stricken villager, it seems nobody has anything better to do than spend literally their entire day professionally and or recreationally hating bearers. And I'm gonna be honest, it's something of a bus driver's holiday for your old pal Steph Sterling. I'm a fat trans girl and I live in the UK. If I wanted to be sneered at and verbally assaulted in a range of funny British accents, I could just walk outside. I can't say that Britain is worse than Final Fantasy XVI's Vagisil. It's scary out there, and I've been given shit plenty before, but the bigotry of even Turf Island is not so extreme that literally every stranger I meet, every client I have, and every single cultural event is centred entirely around a desire to see me dead. Just a notable percentage of them. Now, most people don't give a shit one way or another, which is itself a problem, as apathy can provide a cover for the actual hate. Then again, that's the sort of nuance that this game's lacking. It focuses so much on the extreme that we never get an exploration of the insidious. That's the thing about fascism. It isn't all Sieg Heil and jackboots. I think that's something we're seeing a lot of in the real world right now, but then again, I'm doing the politics thing again. The algorithmic AI that obviously rewrites all my scripts has requested I stop doing that.
You've been a naughty politics girl again. Bad girl.
In part, Final Fantasy XVI suffers from something I like to call the poke-plot problem, a phenomenon I first noticed in the Pokemon series of games, and speaks to the often blinkered, creatively isolated, thoroughly unsubtle approach to writing that so often appears in mainstream video games. The poke-plot problem is when a game's entire world is so utterly focused on the game's central conceit that every inhabitant seems cultishly enthralled by it. To me, the world of Pokemon seems gripped in this cult-like attitude toward the titular pocket monsters, to where even though it seems like humans are in charge, they appear to have been manipulated into relying upon, obsessing over, and practically worshipping electric rats and frogs wearing sumo pants. Literally, every NPC you meet is talking about Pokemon. Every show on TV, every book, every cultural event is about Pokemon and Pokemon-related lifestyles, which is every lifestyle, because Pokemon is life. It reached its absurd zenith in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, where we learn that the entire education system revolves around Pokemon, with the curriculum's main course literally just being don't bother going to school and do Pokemon shit instead. I mean, I say instead. If you do attend school, guess what you're doing? Yep, if you do decide to try and get a fucking education in this world, you're in for a disappointment. Every single subject that isn't the Pokemon subject is still a Pokemon subject. You can't even learn maths in this game without numerical lessons being explicitly tied to fucking Pokemon in some way. That is the poke-plot problem. A world so narrow-minded in its presentation that the game's entire population seems slavishly devoted to that game's singular theme. It's not always detrimental to a game, in fact it's often not, but once you spot it you can't help seeing it forever from that point on. Most recently, Street Fighter VI's excellent World Tour mode did it to a genuinely funny degree, with a world in which fighting is all that matters. All the world's problems are fighting, and all the world's solutions are fighting. The economy is fighting, entertainment is fighting. Fighting is so ingrained in people's lives it's literally legal to attack cops in the street without provocation, awesome, and they'll happily engage in martial combat before giving you a present for beating them. Less hilariously, the modern day Deus Ex games, I say modern day, they're fucking ancient now, the last two Deus Ex games do this with the central transhumanist premise of augmentation. Despite being a world full of potential for exploration of its politics, its technology, and its culture, for the most part, all anybody wants to talk about is what should be just one of the world's many aspects, but is instead the be-all, end-all. How about them augments, huh? Is all anybody wants to say. It can be silly, but like I said, it's not often such a problem. It does more than come across as, well, a bit silly. When you apply the poke problem to the deliriously joyful bigotry of a population that hates the protagonist's guts, however, you run into a bit of a grinding contention. This is a place in which you're expected to spend dozens upon dozens of hours of your time, and when everyone, up to and including most of the goddamn quest givers, have nothing but contempt for you, well, it becomes a little hard to want to do anything in the game other than burn it down to the fucking ground. Fuck saving it. Fuck even simply improving it to the point where everyone can be equal. This is a realm where the most common villager is an irredeemable monster who doesn't just see your kind as less than human, but actively partakes and revels in the constant starving, beating, and murdering of them.
Fuck me.
Like I said, even quest givers are bloody horrible to you, and you're supposed to just go through with their requests all the same. You'll walk up to someone with a side quest and they'll look at you and say shit like, "Oh, that's all I need. need a bloody bearer. Basically words to the effect of, fuck off you dirty twat, I want nothing to do with you, before they begrudgingly give you some fetch quest or point out a bunch of monsters to kill. Upon completion of the task, they still talk to you like you're a dickhead, with the most gratitude they're willing to part with being something like, pass my thanks along to your master. And since this is a game in which player agency is pretty much nil, you don't get a choice in how you respond. You're expected to simply agree to the job, and the only way to refuse the guy treating you like dirt is to simply turn down the quest and the rewards that come with it. Despite already being a fugitive who has no problem facing down entire garrisons of well-trained soldiers when the plot demands, Clive is nothing but a good little doormat in these interactions, the most he may offer being a little tut before following orders.
Hey, you lost or something? Sorry, but the Imperial Guard's got no use for your kind. The infantry always needs more bodies, though.
I'm just passing through.
You are such a loser, good for you. It's something that a lot of people can't do.
It runs completely at odds with Clive's actions in the main plot, as he selectively comes across like a spineless wet blanket who can fight literal gods but can't so much as chat back to a smug little shopkeeper.
There's nothing here for your kind, Branded. Go on now, shoot.
I have a delivery from Etienne. Fresh from the master's table.
You are such a loser.
What really got to me was a daisy chain of hatred that went out of its way to present the most extreme examples of Valestilla's everyday cruelty in such a condensed manner it almost came off as a parody of itself. I just got done in a city full of people happily refusing to feed their bearers and talking to Clive like he was absolute shit. Par for the course. I then came across a nobleman screaming for help in the field. His son has been pursued by a ravenous wolf, and after the obligatory verbal assault, he agrees to let Clive save him. Clive notes to himself that the man didn't sound overly concerned, and I already could see where this was going. I find the wolf, save the boy, only for him to start telling me off for not dying like I was meant to, because he and his dad were sending bearers to be torn apart by his pet wolf for entertainment.
Stop looking at me like that. We were only having fun.
Having fun?
Why are you still speaking? Father will hear of this.
When Clive returns to the noble, who is on his own in a massive field without witnesses, he does the daring, heroic thing of lightly scolding the two serial murderers and then walking off to bury their many victims, all while knowing they plan to buy a new wolf and keep serial murdering.
Can't we just buy another hound? A bigger one, a better one.
Of course, my son. I'll have the villagers fetch us another. With jaws powerful enough to nip this Branded's head clean off his shoulders.
Anyway, a nameless man turns up by the corpses, says he has been burying them for a while, and then we hear the nobleman and his son screaming in the distance, as the stranger more or less admits he orchestrated the new wolf tearing them to bits. It's at this point I decided I no longer wanted to play as Clive. I wanted to be this unknown NPC who actually had a fucking spine and was taking it to this shower of bastards. I didn't get to do that, however. Instead, I had to walk past a bunch of farmers talking shit to the bearers they were forcing to toil in the fields, unable to do a thing, before meeting a little girl who lost her pet Chloe. She went running off, I'm told, and she has beautiful white hair, and her mum calls her a filthy little thing, and can you guess where this is fucking going? Can you guess that Chloe is a bearer, and the little girl just shrugs and plans to buy a new Chloe? And can you guess what it is Clive does in response? That's right. He scolds the girl and walks off. He walks right into a village, in fact, that's full of people like that little girl whose casual NPC dialogue is telling him what garbage he is. Oh, and then Clive finds out that wolves are outside the village and threatening to attack. He says he can't let those wolves get too close to the village, and I had to stop. I had to stop and ask, why? Why can't we? Why shouldn't we? It is a village of monsters, of cartoonishly evil monsters, and Clive could do what Clive had done in the past two interactions and just walk away.
Just walk away, and there will be an end to the horror.
In Fallout 3, you get the chance to let feral ghouls into Tenpenny Tower and slaughter the privileged, elitist, murderous bastards inside. In Final Fantasy XVI, you, as the would-be liberator of a slave class, obey. You obey. Would you, Clively? One thing I like about Final Fantasy XVI is that it brings back the tradition of the truly great video game villain. So many games have forgotten that memorable villains can absolutely make for a fantastic plot. In fact, far too many games have removed real villains entirely, replacing them with the trendy, impersonal concept called something like the corruption, or the blight, or the darkness. Almost immediately, 16 gives us Benedicta, a pipe-smoking, sauced-up, ruthless shitheel whose spite is matched only by her incredible dress sense. And she's just for starters. There are some delicious antagonists in this game, but because of the poker plot problem, they all universally suffer from a major hamstring. None of them come across as any more vile than the average villager NPC commonly encountered in any given location. Sure, Benedicta is the kind of merciless bitch who'll strike down her soldiers for displeasing her, and she's just as bigoted as everyone else, but unlike half a dozen regular background characters, she isn't shown working slaves to death while refusing to feed them and mocking them the whole time. Oh, by the way, Clive will slaughter goblins and other so-called beast men in the hundreds before all said and done. 16 makes it explicitly clear that these creatures are intelligent, have a language, even have their own currency, and that they are merely trying to find a home. Slaughtered. In the hundreds. Perhaps the game is trying to make an edgy point that nobody is a hero and the fight for survival is a ruthless one. The point the actual game makes is that even the alleged heroes are genocidal cunts. And we're supposed to care that this world is facing destruction in an unsubtle allegory for climate change. I don't. By the time the world-saving plot takes to the forefront, I decided I want the world to burn. It's an obscenely horrifying world in which the baseline personality for any given NPC is somewhere around the Colonel fucking Volgin region. Let the wolves near the village, let the wolves in the village, open the fucking gate for them. Or at the very least, tell them to shove their quest up their ass, find their own kid, and take the reward off the hateful little shits by force. When an average fucking fishmonger is on par with Ramsay Bolton, you've possibly gone a little bit too far in your grim dark world building. Say what you will about the death and dismay of Game of Thrones, it at least had some levity and moments of relief away from the inhumane. 16 has Sid, about the only character I've ever been happy to see in this realm of pure evil. So, like I said at the beginning of the video, nothing about the game that we've criticised is inherently bad in isolation. You want a depressing, miserable game? I mean, this War of Mine used that somber, harrowing mood to great effect. You want a bleak environment to explore? You've got Dark Souls and similar games. But it's all about context, and it's all about intent, and it's all about what kind of world and what kind of experience you want to present to the player. Final Fantasy XVI is conflicted in this regard. It at once presents you in the role of Clive as something of a power fantasy. That's the experience you have, except when the game decides you are so powerless, you can't even have a go at the dude at the fruit stand. And that is the issue. I think ultimately Final Fantasy XVI suffers from something a lot of games suffer, where they've got a bit of an identity crisis. They're not exactly sure what they want to say. They're just sure they want to say something. And that can be an issue. If I were to request one thing of the game, if there was one of the elements I criticise that I would really like to see addressed more than anything else, it's that lack of subtlety we mentioned. Everyone in Final Fantasy XVI is a moustache-twirling villain, so there's nowhere to go up. There's no pacing. And if the world is so horrific that everyone you encounter is a twat, you run the risk of exhausting the audience, of tiring them out. And I think even worse than that, you lose sight of some of the more insidious, some of the more subtle issues with social injustice, with marginalisation, with fascism, with abuse. It's not all cartoon, absurd comic book villainy. There is some of that extremity, but the worst parts are the parts that are presented as banal. Little tiny arguments, little reasons for exclusion that are presented as logical and reasonable, like, say, justifying your decision to have no people of colour in your game. Just food for thought. Thank God for me. See, he agrees.